In this video, I'm going to show you how to make some easy coil pots. I'm going to show you how to make 3 designs. The first one is this cylinder pot. The second one is this one with the curved walls. And then the third one is this one, which has got some coil designs. So if you like the video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and then you'll be notified when I upload a new video. So when I'm making coil pots, what I always do is I start off by just making a batch of coils and then covering them up with a piece of plastic. And this is how I make coils. So I just start off with the orange shape, and then I sort of roll it between my hands like that, make it into a sort of a cigar shape and squeeze it at the end. And then when you're rolling, what you want to do is you want to start with the tips of your fingers and roll all the way with your hands. I start off just using one hand. Roll all the way with your hands. If you go like that, what happens is you'll get ridges in it from your fingers, and it'll also go, it won't stay round, it'll go into a sort of a flat, almost pancake shape. So roll it with your fingers and the palm of your hand right the way through, so it's a full revolution. And when it's long enough, you can start rolling with both hands. And you might find that it flattens out anyway. I'll try and sort of squish it. So if it gets flat, it'll do that sort of thing where it's going, making like a thudding noise. If that happens, what you want to do is just put it on its narrow side, flatten it out a little bit so it's more square, like that. And then you can make it back into a round shape by just giving it a bit of a twist like that. If you twist it and then start rolling again, it will go round. When you're rolling, you keep your fingers wide and you're sort of moving your hands outwards like that, so it's stretching the clay out. This clay is actually a little bit dry. I think it's been sitting in its bag for a while and it's been quite hot, so the clay has got a little bit dry. So just spray the surface again, and then once you've sprayed it, give it a bit of a wipe down so it's not completely soaking wet. If it's really wet, what will happen is the clay will just slide around on top of the surface. If it gets very long, you can just cut it into 2 pieces, because otherwise it gets a bit awkward to roll. That's about the right thickness. That's about the thickness that I usually make a coil. It's about the diameter of a penny, I guess, is probably one way of describing it. You see that? About the diameter of a pen. Maybe. I mean, I suppose it's probably about my pinky finger, isn't it? But it's slightly wider than my pinky finger anyway. And then when I've rolled it, what I do is I put it on a piece of plastic and then just cover it up. And I cover it up because actually clay coils dry out pretty quickly, and you don't want them to be all dry and cracked by the time you get around to using them. So that's what I'm going to do. I am just going to roll out a batch of coils. There's a few different ways of making a base. The first one, I'm just going to put this to one side for now, but the first technique that I'm going to show you is to make a coil pot, a coil base. And you do that by making a spiral with one of the coils that you made earlier on. Cut the end of the coil on a diagonal. So I cut it on a diagonal like that. And then when you start coiling it, spiraling it in, you get the little end and you spiral the little end in like that, and it just makes the inner section of the spiral look a bit more delicate, I suppose. So you spiral it in like that. I chop it off on a diagonal like this so that it's a bit easier to blend it in and make it into a circular shape. I just coiled that up. I didn't slip and score. I didn't put any slip in between the edges of the coil there. So when you do that, you are going to have to blend at least one side of the coil in, and then the blended side can either sit on the outside of the pot, so you've got the spiral on the inside, or you can put the spiral on the outside and have the blended smooth side on the middle. It's really up to you. So when you're making the base, what I tend to do is I'll use a wooden tool. You can just blend it in with your fingers like that, but I actually find it easier usually to blend with a modelling tool. And the reason for blending is partially to make the clay seal up so that it's watertight, but it's mainly to make sure that the pot is strong enough, because otherwise when you dry the pot out, the coils, if it hasn't been blended properly and there isn't any slip joining the coils together, the coils will just crack apart when they dry, or if they don't crack when they dry, they'll crack when you fire it. So like I say, if you want the coils to go on the outside, you just put the coils base down and then start building the pot up like that. Or if you want the coils to go on the inside and have a smooth outside, then that's fine, you can do it like that. The other way of making a base, I'm going to show you a couple of other ways of making a base. One way is to simply press out a disc of clay. When you're pressing out, it's a little bit like making a pinch pot, I guess, so just make it into a circle. You really just use your hand to compress the clay down like that. So press it down until it's about the thickness of your pinky finger. Transfer it onto a wooden bat. And you can cut. This is a needle tool. There you go. So there you've got a nice disc base. So that's one way of doing it. That's quite a nice shaped base. And the other way of doing it is, of course, to use a roller. When you're using a roller, what you can do is you can put a couple of pieces of dowel on either side, or you can use these. Now, these are just guide rings for the rolling pin. I don't know where I bought these. I can't remember whether they're specifically for ceramics, or they might be for baking. I don't know, but they're quite handy. You just put them on the end of the roller, and then they work like the pieces of dowel would do. If you put a piece of dowel on either side, it means that you roll an even thickness. So again, just cutting around with the needle tool. So you get your coil, pop it around the base, so it's sitting directly on the base, and then you cut it. This is just a modelling tool, but you can use just a knife, a craft knife, or a regular knife is fine. What I do is I tend to cut it on the diagonal like this. I stack them on top of each other, so I know I'm cutting it to the right length, pretty much. And then I use, just make sure that you can see it, cut it diagonally like that. And then what I do is I tend to move that out the way. So you've got a little groove there, you know where you're going to cut. Then I pick it up and support it with my hand, and then just cut like that. The reason I do that, cut it on the diagonal, is that if you cut it straight like that, when the clay dries, it does shrink, and if it's not joined, if you cut it on the diagonal, basically there's more of a surface area for the clay to bond together, and it's going to be harder for it to slide apart if it's on diagonal. If it's just cut at a 90-degree angles, it can just pop apart like that. This is just a tool with a serrated edge. So you're scratching into the surface of the clay where the coil is going to sit, and you're just doing that so that the two surfaces of clay have something to key into. Score it. So that the surface is a bit scuffed up and sticks really well to the base. Do it a couple of directions so you get those little raised patches, little balls of clay coming up. Use a bit of slip. Slip is basically just water and clay mixed together, so it's liquid and it acts as a glue. Using your tool, scratch the ends. So that they bond together nicely too. So ends together, coil in place directly over the base, and then just gently but firmly press the coil, the slipped surfaces together. Just blend the two ends together. Because you've done slip and score, you don't have to actually blend either side. You could just continue adding the coils up in a cylinder as long as they're really well slipped and scored together. However, I think it's best practice to blend in at least one side. But you use a wooden tool. You can either blend the outside if you want a smooth outside, or you can blend the inside. And obviously when you're working, what you need to do is use your finger, your hand, your left hand, or depending on whether you're right-handed or left-handed. I use my left hand to support the outside of the pot. This is the first coil, and what I usually do with the first coil is I do tend to blend the base into the first coil just to make it look a bit neater. You don't have to do this. You can leave the base looking like a separate piece of clay. Tidy up the base like that. Right, so then you're ready to add your second coil, and as I say, I'm just going to add it directly on top of this one to make a cylinder. So that's where the coil was joined before, and when you put your next coil on, it's a very good idea to position the join at a different point on the pot, because if you put it in the same place each time, you end up with a sort of like a little bit like a fault line on the pot actually, where it's a bit weak. And we don't want that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that off, and what I generally do is I will make it into a ring. I'll make it into a coil ring, and then attach the ring to the pot. I just find it easier to make a neat join with the two ends when it's not actually sitting directly on the pot. So slip and spool the two ends, press them together nice and firmly without squashing the clay, and then blend it in. I am going to carry on building this, and then I'll start the video up again when I've put a few more layers on and you can see what it looks like. So then once I've finished, I would just go around and just tidy up any slip that's squeezed through, or any little bits of clay that are looking a bit rough. So now that we've made a straight cylinder shaped coil pot, I'm going to show you how to make a coil pot where the sides of the pot curve out like that. I'll show you a picture of a piece that I made just recently with curved sides that go up into a narrow neck. The way that you do it, instead of positioning the coils directly on top of each other, what you do is if you want to widen the pot out that way, you simply position the coil slightly to the edge on the outside, and if you're bringing the pot in for when you're narrowing the neck, you start to position it slightly on the inside. So if you're widening it out, you position it something like that, just somewhat to the edge. You can't put it right the way to the edge. If you position the coil too far to the side, it's okay for maybe one or two coils, but then after a little while, once the weight of the clay is quite heavy, there's a risk that the pot's just going to collapse. If the side of your bowl is going out like that, there's a good chance that the clay is just going to collapse. Unless you work very slowly and let it harden up a little bit between sessions, and also maybe support the side. So the best thing is, when you're starting at least anyway, to just position it fractionally out off center. So I'll show you what that looks like. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build the sides up in a gradual slope upwards, and then once I've reached the shoulder part of the pot, which is the widest part of this is going to be a vase, the widest part of the vase, then I'll start bringing it back in again to create a neck. I thought with this demonstration I wouldn't go through the whole making the base and the first coil, because it's the same process. Making the base and the first coil is the same, regardless of whether it's going to be a straight up cylinder or have curved sides. Now before I blend the inside, I'll just show you what I mean. You can see there that there's a bit of, it's sort of hanging over the side. And then again supporting the outside edge with my left hand, and with this, because there's a bit more excess clay on the bottom, I blend upwards rather than downwards. Just check that it fits okay, and then so you can see that that is beginning to gradually slope outwards, and I'm just going to carry on building the walls of the pot outwards until I reach a point, the shoulder, like I say, the shoulder of the pot, and then I'm going to bring it back inwards. So what I'm doing now is I am starting to position the coils slightly on the incline, so it's just beginning the curve of the pot going inwards towards the neck of the pot. And then what I do is I just tidy up the outside to get rid of any slip that might be visible on the outside between the coils, and get rid of any score marks that are also still on the clay. Anyway, I won't tidy up the whole thing right now, but that is how you make a curved coil pot. With this pot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some decorative coils. You can decorate your pot in whatever way you like. You can use spirals or rolls of clay or balls or wavy coils. And with this one, what I was thinking of doing is I was thinking I might put a row of clay balls. So I have a coil here, just cutting off a small section of that, and then roll it into a small ball. I'm going to put these, I'm going to sort of position these around, maybe about that. you know, you could, if you wanted to, you could put a coil across like that, so you've got some open space. You can create a sort of a wave shape across the top like that. So you'll see now that what I've done is I have completed the swirls around the top, and then I've used just some balls of clay to fill in the gaps between the swirls. I'm just going to show you, I didn't want to show you the whole thing because it would be so long to show you, but basically this is what I did. Once I'd put the swirls on, I made some balls like that, fit them in, like that, and then just using the modelling tool, you can do it one of two ways. You can either finish it off with a coil on top, or you can leave it with the details around the top edge. If you leave it with details around the top edge, it's very important that you make sure it's securely attached, that all of the joins around the top edge are blended well, just to avoid the piece cracking when it dries. So you do need to go around, just make sure that there's nowhere that the clay is going to be able to crack as it dries. And it's a good idea to, I mean, it's always a good idea to dry slowly, but I think particularly with a piece like this, just dry it slowly under a piece of loose plastic. Right. Anyway, that is how you make a coil pot. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate that, and do, like I say, do subscribe to the channel and you'll be notified when I upload further videos. Thank you so much for watching.